You're in the rant wormhole, where I rant about whatever it is my $5 a month patrons tell me to rant about. This rant is coming from Calopi. He wants me to rant about why Mr. Cynical is a secret communist. So if you don't know who this is, who the YouTuber Mr. Cynical is, essentially he makes these really long analysis videos about Star Wars. He's made a few on anime. They make kind of the same points in all of them. His big thing is individualism and liberating yourself from oppressive structures, that, you know, you have to be the one who works hard and makes it out of where it is that you are. And on the surface, it seems to me that everything that he is saying, fundamentally speaking, is what communism represents. Because communism is not about enslaving the individual, it's about empowering the individual. So what people don't realize is that the very structures of democracy under a capitalist system do not allow for freedom, because of whether it be money in politics, whether it be the fact that oftentimes the people who are voted in represent the interests of the capitalist class. If you look at even like liberal reformists like AOC, you know, she changed her stance on Israel and on ICE right after she got elected in order to cater to the capitalist class. Despite the fact that many of her politics do work in opposition against them, she still had to work within the framework of a bourgeois electoral system. The only time that we didn't see this was with Salvador Allende in Chile, and you know what happened is that they killed him. And so I don't believe that the structures of democracy in a capitalist system can accurately represent the will of the people, whether that be through the control of information, the fact that information is controlled by ginormous corporations and private entities, or outright by the CIA if you look at something like Operation Mockingbird. You aren't offered a proper choice as a working class person. You aren't offered a proper choice as a socialist, that your ideas, your opposition to the current system, is banned outright. If you look at the way that the media talks about it, or if you look at the way that bourgeois democracy suppresses those types of ideas. Or, you know, if you look at COINTELPRO in the 1960s, they went into Fred Hampton's bedroom and just shot him while he was in his bed. Multiple investigations were done that proved this to be the case, that he was assassinated in cold blood for organizing the working class and for no other reason. And they still lie about it. They still claim that they didn't kill Fred Hampton, even though all of the evidence points that to be the case, because they want the illusion of democracy. They want the illusion of choice under the capitalist system, but it is simply not there. And so, in order for the working class to have a true choice, in order for democracy to function, the working class has to be in control of the state. And in our current system, the working class is not in control of the state. The capitalist class, the oppressor class, is in control of the state. They control the politicians, and the politicians work in order to serve the capitalist class. You can see this within any number of policies that directly benefit them, whether it be private prisons or, you know, the grants that are given to these companies that have ginormous lobbyists within the country, you know, in the oil industry and so on. If you look at the military-industrial complex, why is it that we go to so many wars? That Obama put us in 7 different wars, started bombing 7 different countries, because that makes money. It sells arms, and it's immensely profitable for that industry. It's immensely profitable for the oil industry as well. In order for U.S. corporations to come in to the country and then steal the resources under the guise of bringing freedom to Libya and so on, when really what they wanted to do was get rid of competition. They wanted to get rid of other countries that had competing oil companies that did not join into the multinational monopolies that the United States and other countries run. And so I think the very structure of capitalism will inherently lead to imperializing other countries, because that is what brings about the most profits. That's what props up our industries. That's what the American system is built upon. That's what the Canadian system is built upon. They're just a puppet of the US. Like, I don't understand how someone can argue for a system that devalues the individual, which is what capitalism does. It does not give democracy in the hands of people. You don't have a working class choice. In the workplace, you don't have autonomy over your own resources that you use. You have a boss who makes all of this money for putting in less value that you do, and that value isn't distributed among the people who actually make the stuff. If you want to talk about a free society where individuals and individualism is the main mode of production, then you would have to be talking about a socialist country, one in which the people run the state and industries, one in which the people's democracies control the way that that society functions. In a truly democratic society, representatives would be voted upon for the people at all levels of government, and they would be subject to recall at any time by those same people. In a truly democratic society, the workplace, the place that we spend the majority of our life in, would be governed by the people who use that workplace. It is no secret to me that Mr. Cynical does not understand this. That when he talks about capitalism versus communism, he's always talking about it in these vague, authoritarian terms that don't really represent what the ideas are. It seems to me that he's talking from a philosophical perspective rather than a pragmatic one, because he's so afraid of the idea of a collective running the system, of, a collective building society, because he believes that takes away from the individual. But if you have a system in which the collective decides to empower the individual, is that not the collective working together to make individualism happen? And so I don't really see how you can argue that somehow communism is collectivism, therefore it is bad, when you have more freedom to make videos about Star Wars and about how Kreia is the greatest human being who's ever been in fiction, when you have free healthcare, when you have a guaranteed job that you can get via full employment, and when that job pays you handsomely enough to travel anywhere else that you want to go, when you're allowed the ability to go to college and participate as a politician in the Communist Party, when you're allowed to go into college and become a filmmaker to make whatever the hell kind of film you want. Look at fucking George Lucas going out there saying, oh, yeah, the Soviet filmmakers, they had more freedom than I did. Why? Because they weren't under a capitalist market. They weren't under the constraints that the capitalist market inherently creates for filmmakers. If, for example, you wanted to make a film about how amazing Kreia is and about how much you love Kreia, it would be the biggest fan film that you've ever made. If you wanted to make that movie, how would you pitch it to somebody? They would say, oh, it's intellectual property, and it's stupid, and it's not a good idea, and Nietzsche was an incel who killed himself, and all this other stuff. They would go on all about these things, about how it's not good for the market to make a movie like that. And you would be shot down immediately. But, under a socialist system, you're allowed to make the types of movies that you want. I mean, if you look at like Mies, for example, which was a Polish surrealist movie, it directly criticizes the state. There were a lot of Polish movies that directly criticized the state. Even like with the works of Andrei Tarkovsky, I wouldn't necessarily call Stalker a staunch, achievement that just talks about how amazing the USSR is and, oh, we love communism so much. No, it criticizes the USSR. And yeah, it had to do so through a little bit more surreal means, but it does so nonetheless, and it's able to do that. There are enough films that were made that prove this to be true. And there was enough innovation that was made to prove this to be true. That innovation, those things that were accomplished by the Soviet film industry, would not have been accomplished under a contemporary capitalist market, because capitalists know that making the same movies is going to make you more money. That when you have to put all of this money into workers, into production, and you have to save your own hide by trying to make yourself paid handsomely as well, while simultaneously dicking over the people who are working for you when the movie tanks, then you're going to have to think about, what is it that's most likely to sell? And usually it's CG action films that have the same plot, that say the same things again and again. That's what sells. And people watch it, people pay for it, because the market predicted that. But we're never going to get another Andrei Tarkovsky in the capitalist system. We're never going to get someone who creates the concept of the montage as they did in the Soviet Union. Because those ideas were too ambitious. They were too big. And sometimes, when you have an idea that's that ambitious, it doesn't sell. If it doesn't sell, then that's enough of a risk for the capitalists to not make it, to not make any more movies that are like that. It stands to reason, then, that the most individualist system, the system that empowers the individual the most, is one in which everyone is taken care of, one in which everyone has a job, one in which everyone participates at the democratic level and participates in the function of the state. You are allowed to be the type of artist that you want under socialism. You are allowed that right. It is inalienable as a member of the working class. Therefore, I do not see a reason why Mr. Cynical, who feasibly, if given different circumstances, could have been born poor, could have been born without an education, to a family of drug addicts, but maybe, just maybe, he played Knights of the Old Republic, and it gave him some hope. But he never got to make the Philosophy of Kreia video, because he didn't have the money for the equipment, because he didn't have the money for the education to properly explain his ideas, and he was sad because he couldn't do that. That happens every day. That happens to everyday Americans, everyday people in contemporary capitalist countries. Do you remember how happy it made you when you finished that video? When people watched it and they reacted to it and they felt that it was special? Would you be happy knowing that other people could do the same thing, could spread the same message, and feel proud as artists for doing so? Now think about the fact that under capitalism, people aren't allowed to do that because they're born in impoverished circumstances. They didn't get to finish high school because their family is racking up debt and they can't eat. And so they're forced to work a minimum wage job in which wages are stagnating as inflation goes up. And productivity goes up as well, but they aren't accommodated for it. This is not what an individualist system looks like. This is what a cattle slave being whipped again and again, told that their dreams are not true and that they cannot fulfill them, looks like. If you want to talk about individualism, if you want to talk about artists doing whatever they want, pushing paradigms, making new things, then what you're talking about is socialism, not capitalism.